This is the video series where I'm gonna go over different UI components in the UIKit framework for iOS. Please do the subscribe thing to get a notification about upcoming videos in this series. In the first one, I'm gonna talk about the UILabel, the simple component for displaying text. Let's do here in an example project where I'm gonna add a label, and let's see what we can do with this. This label, as we can see, we can adjust the area of where it is being placed, but we can see that the text is placed in the center of the vertical like this. So even if I make it big, the text is centered, which we can use to our advantage sometimes. Let's see what we can do to what kind of attributes this component has. First off, we have text, plain, and attributed. We're going to come back to that. That's for making more advanced text. We have the obvious one, the text. Here is text. For changing the text, we can set the color of the text, which is for the whole text, like this. We can set the font. We can just change the size here, or we can change the font as it is. Now we have the system one, and we have different template styles here. But we can also do here and do the custom for a custom font and change the size and type. Let's stick with system for now, and let's make a somewhat big size like this. And let's drag this out. The next part to look at is here alignment. That is left, center, right, justified, and natural. Natural means that in those places where text goes from left to right, it is left. And in those places where you write right to left, it's right to left. So this is according to the text of the place that you're in. For a simple doing center text, we can do that. And then here we have number of lines. So right now, as a default, it is one line. But if we do a lot of text, let's just do here is a lot of text like this. It cuts off. Even if we have a big one, it cuts off because it's one line. If we do 2 lines, it is 2 lines. If we do 3 lines, it's 3 lines. 4 lines, and so on. But if we do 0 lines, that means unlimited lines. That just add more lines. So usually it's like 1 or 2 or 3, and then it is unlimited. So this is a great way if you're gonna have like a if you load up a longer text and you just want the beginning, you can add that. So just cut it off at 3 lines. And we have some things here. We can do how the line break works. Here's a good one, the auto shrink. That is, sometimes the text, if you load in a text from an external source, or perhaps if you have text in different languages, the text might be longer or shorter. So let's do something like this and do a label area here. And let's give this some simple constraints, something just like this. Let's say 130, just some values just to have a text area like this. Now this is a little bit long, so let's cut this off to, that is just fits, but let's make it just a little bit longer, like this. Now it just doesn't fit. What we can do now is say that we have set it to system 42 is the size, but let's say it's not a fixed font size. We can do a minimum, either scale or size. But let's go for font size, and I can say that I'm willing for it to shrink down to like 21, which means that it shrinks down from 42 until it fits. So this is perhaps 30 something in size. So it's okay for it to shrink a bit. And minimum font scale, we can set it to, like, it's okay for it to shrink down to 90%. Then it won't fit. But let's say I'm willing for it to shrink down to 30%. So if we were to add some more text, you can see it shrinks down, which is great if you want to fit some text. We can skip these things for now, and we can go down to, these are all view related with the background and things like this. Oh. These things. But the thing is, a common thing is, sure, we can do this and say, hey, I want this in a red color. But many times, perhaps we have a long descriptive text about how our app works. And we want some underlined words and perhaps some words that are in bold and things like this. Then label doesn't really work like this, plain. Then we need to switch over to attributed. What we can do here is, now it's very, very big. So let's do, before we do this, I just want to switch this over to a smaller size, because it's a little bit easier to see. What we can do now is it keeps the whole thing as attributed here. It's centered with the font and the size and things like this. But let's do something like this, that now we can say here is text. Then we can mark text and do something like change the text color here, like this, and say I want that in link color, like this. So here is text. And we can do change different parts of the text with the color and the font and the, like they were several labels stitched together. So here we can do, now let's look at how we can do this, what we can do in code with this one. So I'm just gonna do here and I have prepared a outlet here for this, the label. We can do this from the beginning and do an outlet here and call this the label, like this. And the simple one here, if we switch this back to plain, then we'll lose the attributed thing. And just say this is plain, this is this color, this is all the text. The simple one is just say here in view data load, the label's text is hello, like this. If we look at the documentation for the UILabel, what we have from this, we have some text here. We can set the text and the color and the font and the alignment and the lines, things that we had before. And then we have how we can select how the baseline is aligned and the line breaks and the outer shrink that we looked at. We can set a shadow for the drop shadow with the color and the size and the offset and things like that. Then we have the attributed text here, where we can set individual parts to different fonts and colors and things like this. And in code, we can set the text like we just did. Then we can set the attributed text. We're going to do a simple example soon. We can set the font and everything we can set in code, of course. And there are things here for drawing and positioning overrides. And here we can say, this can be handy sometimes if we have a label that we don't know how big it is. We might want to get a return. How big will this be if I fill it with text? So here is give me returns the drawing rectangle for the label's text. Sometimes that is handy. So we can give it, just say, get a return of how much space the text will use up. Because we can do this, now I set a height for this in the constraint. If I remove that, like this, we get no warning. It just is as big as it needs to be. So let's say that I add a UI view under here. I'm gonna just give this some color so we can see it. And like this, and give this, say, 20 up to the label, and then just say, give it some width and some height, like this. And I want to center it horizontally, like this. Which means this is under the label. So if I have this and say, unlimited number of lines, and as I make this thing bigger, the label, let's make it very big. It takes up as much space as it needs. And we can see this UI view moving down. And if I cut this, it moves up like this. So the label can be set to use up as much space as is needed. And we can set the text like we did. But setting the attribute text could be a little bit a little painful sometimes. So here we have, in my example, now we don't need to set the text there. I have a string, a normal string with some text. Then I make an attribute which says that the foreground color should be blue. And as we can see, this is an array of things. So we could set it should be foreground blue, and the font should be this, and the font size should be this, and many things. Then we make an attributed string like this, an attributed string, and say, here's the string one, the string one. What is the attribute? Here's the attribute, like this. So now we made an attributed string, which is a string plus attributes. Then let's just do the whole thing one more time with another string here with more text. And let's say here that the foreground color should be red instead. This one was blue, this one is red. And let's just do the same thing with an attributed string. Here's the string, here's the attribute. So now we have two of these. Then let's make a mutable attributed string and append the first one, the second one, like this. And then say, hey, the label, your attributed text is this. Let's try this out. We should get some text blue, more text in red. So like this, then we get some text, more text. Which could be sometimes automated if we perhaps do a search replace kind of thing. If we have a big text and say that I want some part with the underline and things like that, we can do a function to parse that string. So this is what we can do with the UILabel. I'm gonna come back with more videos on go over other UI components in UIKit. Please let me know which component you would like to see next. And please subscribe to get a notification about upcoming videos.